Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Jill Simons, and I'm so excited to grow in the radical art of standing in what God says about you with you today. The show is a place where we pour into the sense of who God is, who we are, and how we can live more in the freedom that He has for us every single day. Hello and welcome to the Authentic Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Jill Simons. We've got a really fun episode for you today because I think that that's something that doesn't get kind of melded with spirituality enough, which is fun. Do we ever talk about having fun with God or embracing the joy of the Lord with Him, like in conversation with Him? I don't really feel like I have ever heard a message about this. And this has been something that the Lord has really taught me just through my personal relationship with Him and times in prayer. I'll tell you some stories of some just hilarious things that God has said to me before that are just so encouraging and just so human. There's just such a real relationship with God available. And so if you have nothing like that in your life, or you are there with me, either way, I hope that you enjoy this episode and that it helps you think about maybe a new way to go deeper with the Lord. And specifically, we're going to be talking about how can you go on a prayer date? How can you really go deep with the Lord? And if you're not comfortable with like the date word, if you're maybe males listening to this, maybe feel uncomfortable, or date has really stressful connotations to you, think of it as a play date like you had when you were 5, like not a stressful, sweaty first date, an actual time to have fun with the Lord, play with Him, get to know Him, just explore together. So to start off with, a lot of people that I know, especially, have very, very regimented, strict relationships with God. I think that this is not wholly a bad thing. There's a lot of discipline around their faith life. There is a lot of discipline around how they interact with God. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Those kinds of devotions and things like that are not negative or bad. But I think that there is more. I know that there is more because every single one of us have more that the Lord is inviting us into, whether you are like one of the greatest saints in history or you are someone who's just starting out. The endless call from God is that there is more. Because how could there not be? Just on a logical basis, if God is eternal and God is, all of the grand outside of time terms that we use for God, then we cannot in our finite lives exhaust what He has to offer. This is just a logical conclusion. And so I always like to frame conversations about how we interact with God using something I think is a really helpful metaphor, and it's extremely biblical, but we don't usually push it all the way to its natural conclusion, which is this idea that God is both King and Father. Totally scriptural, right? We talk about God as King all the time. We talk about God as Father all the time, but very rarely do we look at what is the reality of your life if your Father is the King. What does that look like? What does that mean? And so I find that people are usually comfortable with one or the other. But when you start talking about the fact that we need to relate to Him in both ways, pretty much everybody gets uncomfortable. And so I like to do that. That's how I like to begin conversations, is looking at, again, what's the reality if your actual Father is actually the King? And so we can look at royal families around the world that we see, and we know that there's monarchs with children, And they are living this sort of complicated dynamic where there's a public life where we're really looking at the father as king in that specific scenario, where there's, bowing protocols and social protocols and rules about etiquette and standing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of people are comfortable with that. That's sort of as many of you know, my faith tradition is Catholic. And so there's a lot of Catholics that are specifically comfortable with very formalized forms of prayer, which a lot of Protestants say is not necessary because they're typically primarily relating to God as Father. And again, I don't want to demonize either camp. They're both totally scriptural and totally necessary. What I want to posit is that you can actually do both, and you actually probably should do both, because then you're stepping into the fullness again of who God is, and not just kind of lopping off a part of him and saying, I will have a relationship with this part of you, but that part of you makes me uncomfortable and I don't want to have a relationship with that. And that's the same as with our relationship with people. You probably wouldn't stay in a relationship, a romantic relationship, or even a friendship very long with a person who is like, I'm comfortable with this part of you, but I don't even want to acknowledge that this other part of you exists. That's very dehumanizing, isn't it? To have someone say, to really draw the example acutely, I have a son with autism, and it would be very dehumanizing to have someone say, I'm comfortable with the part of you that's a math savant, that's able to be my study buddy and help me, do better in math. But I'm uncomfortable with the part of you that is socially awkward and doesn't always pick up on social cues. And so I'm just going to completely ignore that side of you, basically get what I can get out of this side of you. And that's the extent of our relationship. We don't do that to people. Why are we doing that to God? God tells us that he is this fullness of King and Father, and we have a very clear path forward to cooperate with both. When we relate to God as King, that's our more formalized times of prayer, when we are really participating in the larger church, in participating in worship, participating in recognizing the grandeur and importance of who he is as our God and our Savior. But he's also our Father. And so when that time of public worship is over, he also wants to invite us to sit down at the kitchen table and tell him about our day. And both are necessary. And so the prayer date, bringing it all the way back to what we're actually talking about today, the prayer date idea is, let's relate to God as a person. Let's relate to God as Father. And so choose your terms, whatever makes you feel comfortable. Prayer date, prayer play date, prayer, coffee with dad, whatever. I'm not going to be strict on the terminology, but the energy around it is, let's hang out with someone that we are intimate with. Let's have time to really truly be present to each other as individuals. And so there's obviously a ton of ways you can do this, just like there are a ton of ways that you can hang out with your friends. I am going to share a couple ideas that you might really enjoy, and then I'm going to share some thoughts about really how to do this and frequency at which it's helpful to do this. Obviously, it would be super awesome to have flexible time every single day to sit down with God in this way. If you are at that stage of life, please do it. More power to you. Like, what a gift. I am not at that stage of life. I do not have kind of long chunks of unbroken time available for this. So what that looks like for me is that I try and use daily prayer time, definitely use time for declarations, reading my Bible, and short conversations with God during the week. And then on Sunday, I try and go on a prayer date each Sunday. That doesn't necessarily mean I physically go somewhere, but I try and have time that's extended with God, getting to know each other time. And I think that is why I primarily use that word date, is because I think that that's a helpful social construct that we're used to, where when you go on a date with someone, that's time to get to know each other. That's time to grow in intimacy with each other because you potentially want to spend your life together. And this is someone that you're going to spend your life with. And so why not spend time getting to know each other better? Because you're on the road together and you can kind of enjoy it, or you can be strangers to each other. God doesn't push it either way. But obviously there's so much benefit to intentionally cooperating with walking with God as you go through your life. So this is something that I think starting out is really helpful to do on a weekly or monthly basis. If you are in a crazy time of life, if you're new to getting to know the Lord in this way, maybe monthly is what you feel comfortable starting out with. But I recommend this to be a longer time where you take maybe 1 to 2 hours to really spend talking with God. Now, we also, like a first date, don't want this to be something where we have no plan, nothing to actually do except sit and stare at each other, because that can be something that can actually deter us from wanting to do this again. If it's a really just kind of negative, awkward experience, then that's not something that is necessarily super motivating to return to. So what we'd like to do instead is have sort of a plan for your time together. And that's what I have several proposals for, but that's certainly not exhaustive. And if you have your own idea, I'd love for you to share that in the comments about how you go about taking this time, or how you'd like to go about taking this time with the Lord in the future. So number one idea would be to actually take this time on your prayer date to use the technique that we talk about all the time in hearing from the Lord, to write back and forth, to script the conversation between you and God. Say me and say what you say, Jesus, say what he says, and just keep going back and forth. This is really, really cool because you have then a written record of what is said in this time together that you can return to. And so especially if you're learning the Lord's voice kind of for the first time, or you're early in your journey, this is really, really helpful, because then if you kind of lose the thread, get away from it a little bit, you can kind of go right back in to that same place of relationship by rereading what the Lord has said to you. And so taking an hour or 2 hours even to journal this way back and forth creates a ton of content, a ton of space for you to ask the Lord questions, get information from him about his heart for you and the situations in your life, how he wants you to pray for those situations, all kinds of things. And in the PDF that's linked in our description, we have a whole different set of prompts for a writing prayer date where you can go through and write out back and forth with the Lord, but these prompts are kind of places to start the conversation. So ideas like ask God about a situation in your life that's confusing to you right now, or share with the Lord one thing that you really realized you were grateful for this week. Something like that, where it's kind of a place to start the conversation. So again, like a first date, you're not just sitting and staring at each other. Another awesome idea for a prayer date is to go out into nature and to spend that 1 to 2 hours praying as you go, asking the Lord to show himself to you in what you experience in nature around you, not because nature is God, but because God is nature's creator. And as the creator, there is so much of himself. There is so much of his fingerprints on all the created things that we observe when we are out in nature. And so when we take that time to very intentionally ask God, where are you in what I am seeing? What do you want to show me in what I am seeing that you have created? Then we have this whole new way of seeing opened up to us, this way of experiencing nature that becomes a spiritual experience. And I know a lot of people experience this organically in nature, where there's a spiritual element to being just amongst the trees and the mountains and the ocean and whatever locale you are in. He is the creator of all of it. So you can go wherever you have access to, and ask him to show you how he is present and what he wants to show you about himself in that place. A third idea that can be a great starting point for a prayer date is praying for God's word for other people and really looking for God to share with you how he would actively like you to be his hands and feet in the world. So this is going to be just another time of personal prayer. It can be coupled with writing if you want to do that, but it's going to focus on how is the Lord calling you to be him in the world? How is he calling you to use your gifts? How is he calling you to serve the people in your life or the people that you meet throughout your day? And really, how does he want you to think about that? How does he want you to see your role as a Christian in the world? This is something that's really helpful to do in a long format like that, because again, you can have a lot of conversation and get a lot of information that can give you clarity about how to move forward for a long time after this prayer date. And this whole idea is based on the fact that it's beneficial to have these times to go deep. A lot of focus is paid to what's our daily rhythm of prayer. That's totally important. That's totally foundational. Again, if we think of this like a marriage where there's that level of intimacy between partners, we absolutely need to be talking about, what's the physical interaction look like on a daily basis? What's the verbal interaction look like? Is there time to touch base and hear about each other's day on a daily basis? But any marriage professional, therapist, prep, leader, whoever will tell you that it is deeply beneficial to marriages to take, whether it's a date night or a short overnight or something like that, on a regular basis, because people need time to go deep with each other. There needs to be a forum for us to really encounter each other outside of this regular day-to-day level. And so I hope that these ideas kind of bring up some other ideas in you, some ideas for how you can use this in your life. As I said, there's a PDF we've put together on how to go on a prayer date, and there's a variety of ideas, more than I mentioned in this podcast, so it's well worth checking out, as well as some prompts for prayer in each of the situations. And I'd love to continue to update that PDF with your ideas. So if you have ideas, drop them in the comments. Let me know how you plan to or have already taken time to go deep with the Lord and really encounter him in a very personal way, so that you can build that intimacy and carry it into your everyday life of prayer. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think, and let me know if you're going to try this, because I would love to pray for you as you embark on your prayer date journey. I hope you have a great week. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. It is always a joy to be with you. I encourage you to subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, whichever place you most prefer, or do it all if that is what floats your boat. We would love to continue to get to know you better and grow in relationship with you. And so I encourage you to check out the links in both our show notes and our YouTube description that tell you more about where you can connect with us elsewhere. The two big things we have going on besides the podcast is our shop that is full of reminders of who you are in God, helping you to really grow in that radical art of standing in who you are and giving gifts that help others to do the same. The other big thing we have going on is the Uprising Academy. This is all of our formation programs, workshops, retreats. Everything is available virtually and on demand, where you can sign up and continue to learn more about radically standing in what God says about you, especially if you are in a place in your life where you are not being fed the way that you long to be fed, whether it's in your community, whether it's at your church, whatever it is, there is more for you, and we can absolutely walk with you into it through the Uprising Academy. All those links are in our show notes, and if you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to leave a review. Reviews are the number one way that we help get in front of new faces, new people that are able to be touched by the radical art of standing in what God says about us. I love you. I'm praying for you. I hope you have an amazing week.